Hi, I'm Dawn Allen. Welcome to Voices from the Middle. What we'd really like people to know and understand about what we're doing here is that this is not about bringing media spokespeople or political pundits or, God forbid, politicians. This is about bringing on Americans, people from the Midwest, specifically women. We want to allow for a conversation between 3 to 4 people about topics that don't just involve men. Topics that, in fact, women have a lot to say about and have a lot of experience in, and have the right to be able to talk about solutions that they feel should be listened to and taken seriously. We may start with one topic, and it may naturally morph into another topic. And we're not going to play into editing people's opinions. So be aware of that. We are selecting women from every age group and across every class system. We have an abundance of experience and experiences that allow us to provide something that a few men across the country can speak to, but it's rare. And that is how do you manage a home, a job, all the things that go with raising children, and keep your sanity. We want to honor that women are able to do all these things, and because of that, they can take that experience and apply it to solutions that may not occur to men.
Hi and welcome. I'm Debbie Burkhart. I've lived my whole life in the middle of the country. My formative years in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. I received my bachelor's degree in psychology and biology from the University of Texas at Arlington, and later got a master's in fine arts and writing from Lindenwood University. I'm married, and we raised our son and daughter in Grand Prairie, Texas, and I spent my working years in the Dallas area. I'm now retired and live in Oklahoma.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Kansas City by parents from the greatest generation. I earned a degree at Pittsburgh State in English education. Go Gorillas. John and I married and settled in Olathe, Kansas, where we raised our 2 boys in the same school district where I taught, and I taught junior high and high school. Once our boys were grown, I returned to school, and I earned my MFA in writing at the University of Nebraska and added professor to my resume in Oklahoma. I retired last year to dedicate caregiving duties to my mom and to focus on my writing full time. I've been disillusioned for over a decade by both the media and the politicians and the lobbyists, the greedy power brokers avoiding representing the people. After January 6th, the world suddenly reminded me of the Tears for Fears song, "It's a Mad, Mad World." We were seeing a level of madness before now unknown to our country. It's not like we haven't had our hate-filled moments, as witnessed by the Trail of Tears, slavery, and its aftermath, Jim Crow, or our embarrassing political times, including Nixon. The Trump era added a pandemic and paranoia and a sudden aversion to the things that saved us from polio and the measles. Still, the emergence of a reality TV star with multiple bankruptcies under his belt, strutting down a golden escalator like the emperor in his proverbial new clothes, was a level of madness few of us were expecting. This was not Hollywood heartthrob Reagan winning over the religious right, afterward renamed the compassionate conservatives. The irony of that term is the stuff of political legends. Trump represented almost the worst Hollywood ever offered up, short of Fatty Arbuckle. Or so we thought, until the skeletons began crawling from the emperor's bedroom like worms. and opened a shocking underworld in Hollywood of men like the orange one. Like many my age, I came from a time when we believed we were enlightened by burning our bras. We had a right to birth control, to hold a job, to get a credit card, and certainly to vote. The Me Too movement for me was a recognition and acceptance that things had happened my entire life that women felt helpless to stop. Like my mom's generation before me, it was a realization that the boys will be boys adage was designed to make whatever men did acceptable. We watched legislators forgive and pardon a host of bad faith representatives in our government, thinking this was the worst. Then a poor loser led an insurrection on the Capitol. Laws were broken. People died. Safeguards put in place by our forefathers fell to a sudden acceptance of immorality. The first felon has now been given a second chance to drive us further down that road to a total lack of civility. For me, only madness can explain people of faith blindly following a man who can't hold the Bible right side up and has no idea what his favorite verse is. Then he puts together his own Bible, which is a clear violation of church and state, and sells them to make money for his defense fund. Committing crimes gets expensive. This past election year broke our country in all new ways. I watched Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, devoted Republicans, stomp for Democrats for president and vice president. I'm an independent, and both parties managed to turn me off in this election cycle. The Republicans walked away from the people they represent in order to join a cult. The Democrats, who are now the compassionate party, have lost their way as well, losing all touch with who and why they began this fight in the first place. I've listened for years as political and media pundits talk policy with little reference to much beyond the Beltway and both coasts. If the middle is referred to at all, it's usually as flyover country, as in nothing worth seeing here. I'm an involved voter. I knew it gained me little, but my parents believed in democracy. So I had this crazy idea my generation would fix things. Then came the TV ads, which I find inappropriate. Then emails, which bore no resemblance to a response to my letter to them. Instead, they were preaching the party line as if I'd said nothing in that letter to them. With Obama, things became even more modern, which I didn't mind at first. Then the texts began, and both sides of the aisle and the lobbyists all performed the same disservice. Tell us your concerns. Rank our priorities for us. The problem was they wouldn't let us fill in our thoughts unless we gave them money. I did it once. The vultures kept coming, using guilt, fear, whatever they had to work with. The bottom line was neither side cared or knew who I voted for. They didn't know or care what I worried about. They cared that I send them money. This election brought me to a realization. I've written letters to legislators for years, and all it got me was form letters, and then the texting paid me to listen to how you feel. I've walked the streets and made the phone banks, and I have nothing to show for it. I'm done. This is how I landed here with Voices from the Middle. The middle of the country, and women in particular, have been ignored long enough. We aren't giving you another dime. We're going to tell the country how we feel in this forum. and they can listen or not. Then they can see whether they ever get another vote from the middle.
Thanks, Don. I agree with everything you said. I'm going to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent. You mentioned in yours, but I'm going to go into more detail. I have 3 granddaughters and a grandson, but because the country is backpedaling on many of the women's issues, I'm concerned about how it's going to affect my granddaughters. I'm motivated to speak out for their rights. I hear people say they long for the good old days. I always wondered when they were talking about. I presume they meant a time when the average family lived like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. The days when moms were always at home and dads earned enough to give his family a good life, provide a nice house, good food on the table, and send his sons to college. However, few in my experience truly lived that life. My grandmother worked for the post office most of her working life while she raised 5 children. During World War II, she was the postmaster for a small community, but once the war was over, she was demoted to mail carrier while a man took the job of postmaster. My other grandmother also raised 5 children and farmed while my grandfather drove a truck. She not only took care of the children, cooked and cleaned, but also milked cows, gathered eggs, and ran the entire farm by herself while my grandfather was away. My mother also worked while I was growing up, so in my experience, this golden age is a myth. Don't misunderstand me. For women who feel called to not take a paying job outside of their home and devote all their efforts to their home and children, I am 100% behind you. The choice of career or homemaker is one women should have the right to make. One does not make one woman better than another. We all have gifts and talents no matter our choice. However, this mistaken ideal of women working only in the home to raise their children and take care of the house and cook took away opportunities for many women. Although within the confines of her home, women had a certain amount of power and control, in public, professional, and political arenas, women were confined to a dependent secondary position. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, women's right to vote, was ratified in 1920. After more than half a century of petitions, picketing, marches, lectures, writing, and civil disobedience in the support of women's rights, Congress finally put forth this amendment. In the 1960s, we demonstrated and burned our bras for the right to get equal pay, promotions, and respect, same as men in the workplace. In addition, we advocated for married women to have the right to their own finances. The Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced in Congress, believe it or not, in December 1923. It didn't pass. In 1972, the ERA was redesigned to guarantee protection against sexual and gender discrimination under the law. It passed both the houses of Congress and was sent to the individual states for ratification. Finally, in 2020, Virginia became the last state to ratify the amendment. However, there has been controversy over a time limit, as well as whether 5 states, Nebraska, Tennessee, Idaho, Kentucky, and South Dakota, that voted to rescind their ratification had the legal right to do so. Although the ERA has been ratified, it is still being held up in Congress pending further legislation. It has been more than 100 years since the first attempt to amend the Constitution to guarantee equal rights to all people, and 50 years since the updated amendment was put forth. Although in 2023, it was determined that the amendment needed no further action from Congress, resolutions to clarify the controversies have held up its certification. Okay, why? Why has it taken more than 200 years for American women to obtain protection under the law? Why, when women are the majority of the population, is it taking so long to have our rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Why has American men and women allowed politicians to move backwards on this issue, as well as make plans to further restrict women's rights? Will my granddaughters have fewer rights than what I have enjoyed during my adult life? Or will they be chained to an ideology that actively works against them? Here we are again, steeling ourselves for another fight as ultra-conservatives conspire to restrict our rights. We've witnessed the deaths of women who have died because new abortion laws have tied physicians' hands. Women pregnant because they wanted this child die while waiting for their condition to bring them within minutes of death before medical treatment can be administered. Pay equity still does not exist as the norm, and if Project 2025 is fully implemented, it will restrict our ability to vote and to obtain birth control. It's time to dust the cobwebs off of our protest signs, put on our comfortable marching shoes, and prevent the loss of these human rights. As you can tell, it's easy for me to get on a soapbox with this topic, and this podcast is about much more than politics and rights. We want to discuss current issues in an attempt to better understand them and look for possible solutions.
So we're really excited to begin this journey and thrilled to have anyone listen in or participate with our women from the Midwest about concerns, possible solutions. There's information on both mine and Debbie's websites, also on our social media pages. I know I'm on Facebook and Blue Sky and Instagram.
I'm on Facebook, and I'm going to be on Blue Sky.
There you go.
There we go.
And you can find us through our emails, which are on those other social media sites. So if you have any questions or concerns, contact us via email. This information is just to give you an idea of what this podcast is going to be about and who we're targeting, which is everybody in the middle who feels that they haven't been listened to. Our first podcast will be vaccines, fact or fiction. Joining us will be a biological researcher and a pharmacist. And that podcast will go out the final day of February. In this non-leap year, that will be February 28th. We look forward to seeing you then.
See you then.